Welcome to another edition of the Power Talks for Remarkable Females. I am Helena Demuynck. I'm a catalyst for smart, conscious women transforming. I'm your host, and today we are going to talk about relationships. And we have been talking about relationships before, but this is different. We are going to talk about the most important relationship and conversations with that person that we have. The first one, the impactful one, and that is the relationship that we have with our mother. And I am here with Ashleigh Sinclaire, and Ashleigh is an amazing, amazing woman. She is the writer and the producer of the Mother Monologues, a love story that's a deeply personal, relatable, and engaging journey of love, loss, and reclamation. And with vulnerability, strength, and humor, she demonstrates how to transform personal heartbreak into universal healing, leaving you, the audience, inspired and transformed. Ashleigh doesn't just tell a story, she opens portals to healing and awakening. Her life has been a masterclass in resilience, and known for her sassy inspiration and grounded wisdom, she mentors intelligent, creative, soulful women, empowering them to serve with unshakable authenticity. Ashleigh, welcome to the Power Talks. It is just an honor to have you here. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here too. I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. And for everybody that is here joining us live, welcome. There is comments opportunities from whatever channel that you are listening or watching. So if you have questions, if you want to share something with us, if you want to give us feedback, just feel free to use the comment box. Even if you are watching the replay, even if you have to jump out and you watch the replay later, we will monitor the comment boxes. So if there's anything you want to share with us and with the other people here in the audience, then feel free to do that. Ashleigh, the Mother Monologues. How did that start?
Well, uh, I had a fascinating experience with my mother
Mhm.
that I didn't see coming. There was a certain set of circumstances that happened in our family, and I moved her from Florida to Colorado, not knowing how
Mhm.
long it was going to be. And it ended up being 4 years. I was in for one, and it ended up being four because she got healthier, happier, more stable. And I call those years excruciating to extraordinary, and they were, and everything else in between. And it was in my recovery process of after going through the grieving that I was experiencing and had experienced so much healing. And I had been on my healing, conscious, spiritual journey for 25 years up until this point, and thought I had done a lot of work. But the healing that happened with the two of us, both individually and together, it affected everything in my being. And I was asking, like, why? Why was this so impactful? And what kind of came was she's our first relationship. She's our first human relationship. She's our first experience of love. And therefore, also our first experience of perceived separation, rejection,
Mhm.
misalignment, disconnection. So a lot of our initial wounding happens sometimes innocently in that and with that relationship. And so that just opened so much up in me. And then as I was recovering and was feeling creative again, and I always take that as a good sign that I'm resourced, I was like, oh, I want to write another show. I had done a previous one-woman show, I think 7 years prior to that. And I was like, oh, yeah. So long story short, I wrote the Mother Monologues because I felt like her and I had gone through so much in our whole journey together. And I thought, I didn't go through all of this just for me. Like other
Mhm.
people need to hear what occurred between us because some of it was kind of miraculous. And so I wrote the show, and then I started performing it in front of friends in my living room. And I would say to them, look, there still could be some emotional content here. And if there is, I'm going to stop. I'm going to have my emotions, and then we'll get back to the show. And my friends were like, of course, of course. And I started doing that, and then just receiving the impact from them of how inspiring it was and how grateful they were for how I named certain things and how I kind of navigated through taking care of my mother for 4 years at the end of her life. That I just kept doing it. And now I want it to go far and wide for people to see it for their experience. And so I'll be shortly in the next couple of months posting the whole show on YouTube.
Well, yeah, beautiful. It feels like it was a continued healing process for
Yes.
you that you shared with others as a way also to heal.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Because, early on, when I was 25 years old, I went to my first therapist. And after it was talk therapy, back then. And after a couple of sessions, I thought, well, little history of my mom, first of all. She had a breakdown when I was 12 years old. And it was back in the early 70s, and they gave her shock treatment. And she fractured into what we called her 6 channels. And so most of my life, I didn't know what channel she was going to be on. And what I mean by channels is sweet, gentle little girl was a personality, depressed, mean and nasty, out there, entitled queen, and lucid phenomenal. So I didn't know which kind of mother channel I was going to get when I would visit her. And so that put my nervous system into hypervigilant mode, right? Most of
I
my
can
life.
only imagine.
Yeah. And it also made me very independent, which was a good thing. But it also had me what I call manned up, because I looked at her as a model for me, because she's a woman, right? She's my mother. And I just made this assessment like, ooh, not safe and a weak position to be female. So I manned up. So a lot of my journey
Whoa.
a lot of my journey has been to soften, right? And then also to calm down my nervous system. And so when I went to my therapist at 25 years old, and I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to do any healing with her. She doesn't have the capacity. And I'm a very tenacious person. When I was younger, it was called being stubborn. But I looked at that and went, well, I don't want her limited capacity to affect or limit me and my healing. And it wasn't like anybody said this to me. I just had this conversation with myself. And so then I didn't allow that. Like, I didn't have any idea that her and I were going to do any healing together. But what I've done for the last 30 years is been committed to my healing journey. And I noticed something kind of miraculously, which was early on, one of the first things I did was I took her off the hook. I took her off the hook for the woulda, coulda, shouldas that I wanted her to do for me, that I thought she should have done for me because she's my mother. All of those things. I just took her off the hook. And I was like, that did
Forgiveness?
what?
Could you call that forgiveness? You forgave her? Or was it different?
I don't think I was at forgiveness at that point. It
Yeah.
just was, I was, but maybe it was actually, because I was like
Or was
saying,
it expectations that you changed and adopted? Or
yeah, definitely expectations. Because I was like, you did what you did, you didn't do what you didn't do, and that's in the past. Now, that doesn't mean there was still more healing to happen, for sure. But I just took her, and it was like I could feel this energetic tension between us, like a tug of war was gone. And
Yeah.
that was amazing. And what I noticed, because then I just was focusing on my healing, right? That after I did that, after I took her off the hook, I noticed our next conversation was easier, lighter, more loving, more connected. And then I just kept on my journey. And each time our conversations got more evolved. And I often thought, like, how does she know what I'm doing? I'm not telling her. I'm not telling my two sisters. But that's what kept being shown to me every single time. So I learned, and this is one of the key points I want to emphasize today, is I didn't need her participation or her willingness. And I feel like that's one of the myths that we hold, like we need the other person for our healing. And I'm here to say absolutely not.
That's extremely powerful. Absolutely. And it is probably also an eye opener for a lot of us hearing this.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more. What's your learning that you want to share with us
Yeah.
in terms of healing from relationship?
Yeah. Another really impactful thing that I did, and this wasn't until I was in my early 40s, was I took a Byron Katie workshop. And some people might be familiar with her work. It's amazing work. And what it is you test out your stories and your beliefs. And it's a simple 4-step inquiry process. And I went to this workshop. It was like 2.5-day workshop. And I brought my mother's story. I'm like, we just don't have this certain type of connection. Our connection from early on was hot and cold. When it was the two of us, I felt our bond. But I had 2 older sisters. And when all of us were together, I often felt like the fourth wheel. And so her love and attention and connection with me was hot and cold. And so I started with that story. Like, we just don't have this certain type of connection. Because I thought, I'm gonna not prove this theory, right? So the process goes like this. So first of all, with the listeners, bring up a story that you've carried with you, right, for years, because you possibly may be able to do it along with me right here. The process goes like this. Do you know the
I mean,
story?
the story about a relationship you had with somebody that was very impactful.
Yeah.
Or whatever story.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be a belief. The stories are great because our stories either empower us or imprison us.
Yeah.
Right. And so my story about my mom, we just, it's like, it's like, look at me. My whole body is like, it's all tightened up. It's like, right. And so it doesn't allow for greater possibility because of the story that we're holding on to and that we're identifying with, right? We're a character in that story, right? It's very powerful. Okay, so I brought my mother's story. 4 questions. Is the story true? Yeah, the story's true. I got decades of validation on it. Second question. Can you absolutely know that the story is true? Absolutely? No, not absolutely. How would you feel if you dropped the story? And it means every time I go to that point, my body just takes this natural, organic, spontaneous breath. So I'm feeling more open and freer and more loving if I drop the story. And then the 4th question is, can you give one reason to keep the story that does not cause stress? And I couldn't. So I dropped the story of, my mother and I, we just don't have this connection. Because when I dropped it, could I understand for the first time Like when I was making that assessment through the decades, yeah, I was 6, 12, 15. And yes, I know what I felt in those moments, but I
What you
also could,
perceive.
yeah, but I could also see, like, I couldn't possibly know all the variables of everything that was going on, right? And when I could see that, could I name and get in touch with the first time in my life, the longing I had all my life for her to see and love me in a particular way. And that might not ever happen. But when I could name that, be honest and vulnerable with myself about it, when I could name that, could I then fully feel all the feelings that went along with that? So it was a few months after that workshop, my mom decided she wanted to come out here for a vacation. And we were standing in my kitchen about 2 feet from each other. And she looked at me and said, "I love you." And I was able to receive it with, "And I love you." Like I could receive it versus push it away like I'd done for decades, right? Because we just missed our love and care for decades. Because when I was reaching out to her, she was what I would call like insensitive and oblivious to my reaching out. And then when she would reach out to me, I'd be like, "Hey, lady, you had your chance," you know,
Mm.
So we missed it. But in this moment, because I dropped the story, could we have this most intimate, loving moment with each other?
Mm.
And that's up to us. Because I believe, like our generation and women behind us, we've come in because we've had the tools and resources to heal this relationship. Like our mothers, they didn't have these resources. They didn't have these common conversations that we have today, about healing and all the modalities and authentic communication and relating. Like it wasn't around it wasn't around when we were growing up, right?
Yeah,
So we came in to
exactly.
heal this relationship. Instead of waiting for them, we have more capacity than they have. And,
Mhm.
anything that is unhealed within us is fogging our clear seeing, fogging our perception, because we're navigating and seeing life through these stories, through these unresolved
Mhm.
emotions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's interesting to kind of take the lead in this healing and, like you say, do it on your own. If the other person does not have the capacity to co-heal with you or to heal the relationship as an entity, because especially if it is about parents, we always kind of feel like they're older, they're the adult, or at least they were the adult first, so it should be their initiative, or they
Yeah.
should know better, or and things like that. And it's like you say, there is a resentment, there is a blame, there is an expectation
Mhm.
that is keeping us from the healing. Absolutely. And then
Yeah.
of course there's not only the lack of capacity, there's also the lack of willingness, because
Mhm.
sometimes you are dealing with relationships where the other person does not want or is not available
Yeah.
to do that healing. So it is magical if you say that this is something that you can do on your own.
Oh, yeah.
So
And you
yeah.
know what? As like, especially this last, I would say 5 years, um, I practice now what I call radical responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and it could scare people, to be quite honest. But it's along this thread that I learned at 25, which was I don't need her to do my full healing. I don't need it. And so then I've just extended that to every area of my life.
Yeah.
where there's
That was kind of the starting point for agency and accountability.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's so what I have found about it, it is so empowering
Mhm.
because I'm just relying on me. It's the depth of my healing is the commitment and the devotion to the depth of my commitment to myself
Yeah.
so that I don't
It
have to
feels like
wait.
an ultimate act of self-care, right? And self-love.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I call it self-fullness. You know how people like we were brought up, right? To be like, oh, if you're just thinking about yourself and focusing on yourself, you're selfish. Well, I think that was a manipulative trick because I
Mhm.
find it, and I'm very thoughtful of others, but I'm self-full where, like, if I get triggered, I take the attention off that person and I call what I say, I go home because in my home I can think the clearest, right? And I say, what am I feeling? Like I take the storyline away because that's a great
Mhm.
distraction, right?
Yeah. You say you take the storyline away through these four questions.
Well, I don't know how many they are. Well, not those. This is
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
process.
Okay.
Different. Yeah. So I take the storyline away and then I ask myself, what am I feeling? And I name what I'm feeling. And then I say, when have I felt like this before? And for me now, it's like the Jetsons screen comes up. Remember the Jetsons cartoon? No. Okay, maybe it was
No.
a American thing.
Maybe
A
not
lot
in
of
Europe.
a lot of
Yeah.
people will remember Jetsons screen comes up and there's a picture of childhood. And people have asked me, clients have asked me through the years, does everything go back to childhood? Yes,
Mhm.
it does.
Mhm.
The Jetson screen comes up. Here's the picture. Oh, yeah. I was 11 years old. I was living with my father. Da 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 da. Same emotions. Different storyline, same emotions.
Mhm.
Again, I drop the storyline and I stay with the emotions. And I feel those emotions. And they might shift and change. I remember this one instance, I felt anger initially, and then that opened up to sadness, and that opened up to a longing, and then that opened up to a reaching, and then that opened up to I could feel myself compromising myself for attention. And they just kind of like a whirlpool of some kind, right? But just it wasn't
Mhm.
overwhelming because I also remember like I'm in charge. If this gets too big, I can slow it down, right?
Mhm.
But I wait till then all the emotions evaporate.
Yeah.
And then I'm
Just by
left.
being with them.
Say that again?
Yeah. Just by being with them
Yes.
instead of pushing them away or getting overwhelmed by them, just be with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And sometimes you have to
Powerful.
work with someone. Like I
Yeah.
I had to be taught this. Like and when my first somatic therapist was I think in my 30s and I really didn't want to feel the deeper emotions. And I was seeing this gal weekly. And whenever we'd start getting close, I would just crack a joke. I would just make her laugh. And I was good at it. And she even said
Mm.
so. She's like, I've never laughed so much in therapy sessions. But she was also good at what she did. And she would just track me, just stay on my tail. Until then, I would sit there and like feel as much as I could in that round, right? But I noticed every time on the other side of it, I felt more loving, more open, more energized.
Mm-hmm.
And so after, working with her, I just kept doing it for myself because now I know how. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been one of the most powerful things I've learned and have stayed with, and now can be that for others that I've done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I watched both my parents in different ways, like they didn't know how to deal with their emotions. And I looked at them and went, well, I don't want to follow in either one of their footsteps necessarily, so I better figure out what these things are and learn
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how can people start with this? People that feel very, uncomfortable or have no experience or no support in dealing with these emotions and have a tendency to whatever,
Yeah.
analyze them away, push them away, stop them in their body,
Yeah.
go into compulsive behavior or addictions or whatever helps them to avoid them,
Yeah.
and say, okay, yes, this is resonating. This is something I would like to try. What would be like a gentle first approach for somebody to start just being with their emotions?
Yeah. Great question. Well, first, there's got to be, which you alluded to, like there's got to be that commitment within themselves. Like they want to change patterns, behaviors, want healthier relationships, want more energy, more focus, because it really does our emotions like inhibit so much if they're
Mm,
blocked, right? If they're stagnant, if they're frozen, right? I would say one really gentle way. So you got to have commitment like to yourself, because it's not fun necessarily in the beginning till you really have some experience of what it gets you. Okay. So it's going to feel
mhm,
uncomfortable. I'm not going to sugarcoat that.
mhm,
However, it gets easier and easier so that you don't mind the uncomfortable because you know the jewel on the other side and you know you
mm,
have to get through it. There's no getting
mm,
around, sideways, underneath it, numbing it. It doesn't go anywhere. It just doesn't evaporate over time,
mhm,
like the big emotions. So
mm,
what I would recommend is sit in nature.
mm.
Sit in nature. I sometimes sit in nature 6 hours at a time. I used to do it at the beach.
Wow.
I live in the mountains now, so I do it at the river because I need the water. Sitting by
Mm,
a body of water is a really, really good idea. Even a lake is
mm,
fine. Yep, yep.
mm,
Sit there and just don't have music on, nothing. Just can you sit with yourself
mhm,
in the silence and listen to nature and be with
mm,
nature? Can you do that? And then, start bringing up, not excavating for it, but just things that are right on the surface with you of some things that are bothering you. And think of the situation and just feel it and just stay with breathe, have plenty of water, good nourishment, because your body's got to be resourced or it won't go there,
mhm,
right? This is a really gentle way, or in the bath. A bath is a great place as well
mhm.
to
Yeah.
start, feeling it. And then, find somebody that you feel comfortable with and, um, you feel like you have a good rapport with, right? Of course, working with someone is always um, expedient. Yeah.
Mhm. Now, I know that healing is a process. It's not like something that you can put in a moment in time. But if you look at the whole journey or trajectory, especially about the relationship with your mother, because we said it's the most important one that we have. It's the first one. It's very impactful. And so um if it is not uplifting for us as a child, it has an impact on how we see the world, on how we see ourselves, on how we see others,
Yeah.
and on our decisions and choices. So, even though this healing is not a process, but is there a way that you can say, like, before the healing and after the healing, in terms of your your vision on life and your relationship with yourself? I just want also people that are watching or listening here to understand how important it is to do this work, even if it
Mhm.
looks like or feels like a very, you know, um,
Yeah. Like,
essential work. Yeah.
and I appreciate you saying that. That's, I think, one of the myths too, is that people feel like, oh, I'm fine. I don't need to do that. Or,
Mm,
oh, I'm not opening up that door. It's going to be too much. And, you know, and that's
mm,
why, and I get that. Um, and I held that too about certain things, like my father's death. He died when I was 14 years old. And I got really angry. Oof, so angry when he died, because I was like, God, like, why do you need him? I need him. And so I
mm,
didn't, for a decade, I didn't open up that door. And it's keeping a door closed that actually builds the pressure. Because once you open the door, you're not fighting against it. You're not saying no, right? And again, you're in charge. Like I always remind my clients about that. You're in charge of the pace. And another little drop of wisdom here I'll share is, and then I'll come back to it, is if your body is showing you, bringing you back a memory, it's your body's wisdom of telling you it's ready. This is ready to be seen and looked at and released. That's
mm,
insurance. Okay. Not excavating for things. Allow this stuff to arise. Okay. Just by giving it the invitation, like what's ready? What's ready to be healed? It's
mm,
simple. Like it can be that simple. So who was I? If the question is, who was I before and after? Yeah. Well, none of us would have recognized me. I'll tell you that. And oh, I don't want to say I wouldn't have liked myself, but parts of me I would not have liked, because I was defensive. I
you have the
was,
shield up.
oh yeah,
Mm,
defensive. I was what I would call bitchy. I had no problem sharing my anger out to anybody. Um, I was, I will say, I was still fun. I remember that, but I had all these other things. I had a great fear of intimacy. My nickname was the 45-day girl. I would date a guy for 45 days. And as soon as it started to get kind of regular, or I heard things he would say where he thought like he knew me, out.
mm,
And now, the after, well, I believe I am a lot softer, a lot
mm,
kinder. Uh, I don't get angry often. And if I do, I'm so attuned to, because it feels so intense, that again, I like take myself home. I don't want it to go out. And if something comes out with like an edge or a tone, I like apologize, because it's not my intention to hurt anybody. When I was younger, honestly, I didn't care, because I
mm,
had so much pain in here that And it was because I didn't know what to do with it that it just blew out of me. And so, and I also feel more in touch with like actually who I was when I was a younger girl. Like just my innate gifts and talents are online. Like they've been integrated into my natural expression now.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Ashley.
Yeah.
And I want to dig a little bit deeper in what you said, that nugget of wisdom that you gave, that when you are ready to heal, that it shows up or it appears.
Yeah.
And I feel that a lot of us, even if it appears, we don't see it because we are in a rush. We are in a
Mm.
kind of a rat race. We have so many things, so many priorities, so many goals, so many deadlines, things like that. And then when you talk about sitting in nature for 6 hours,
Mhm.
then you allow this healing to, or this need for healing to show. It
Yeah.
is about, like you say, being very aware and conscious, and even sometimes organize this time to connect and see what shows up and what needs to be heard or seen or felt,
Yeah.
and then deal with it. And that is something that I feel that we don't do. We don't
Mhm.
do anymore.
Yeah. I I was when I was 25 years old, I also had graduated from college, was in a management position in this company, got promoted quickly. And I was like, "Oh, okay. So what's next?" And what I understood from the culture was, okay, the next is husband, children, raise the kids, do the career, and then sit on the porch. And I thought, no, there's got to be something else. There's
And
just,
you knew that when you were 25?
yeah.
My gosh, congratulations. Most of us just realize that when, or maybe sometimes never, but a
Well,
lot
yeah, I
longer.
did.
That's
I was
right.
like,
So, yeah.
there's got to be more than this, than that.
Mm,
And I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to start trying to figure it out.
mm,
And then from there, found the therapist and have been on the journey ever since. And that's honestly, that's been my number one commitment is healing, is
mhm.
being me, the best of me,
Yeah,
whatever that means, right? And
yeah.
also, a big principle for me has been freedom. And so liberation. So that's been the driving force for me. Um, and you have to, and maybe it's not everybody's path. This isn't everyone's path, right? However, if you've had those thoughts of like, isn't there more to life than this? Just being in the
Mm,
rat race, so to speak, like where's the joy and the love and the laughter? Are you having enough of that? Is that really your daily like medicine,
mm,
right? Or what are your biggest values? And are you living those? Are those in the forefront of your mind and your decisions every day? And
yeah.
finding out what those are.
Mm, yeah. You have a radical responsibility for that, right?
Yeah.
But there's two other radical elements that you have integrated in your vision and also your programs and what you do. So tell us a little bit more about the other two.
Yeah, there's radical self-care, what I
Mm,
call so it's radical responsibility, radical self-care for radical service. And when you do the first two, the radical service just happens. And my definition of radical service is, and this wasn't my this definition, but it came from somewhere else, which I can't remember in this moment, but it's the ability to respond with love, no matter what's happening. The ability to respond with love is radical service, and having no agenda, just coming, being in your, what I call in your heart and your soul, and in the greater field, and listening to what's needed next. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's just a word, right? So that's what I call radical service. And the radical self-care is, we've touched upon it a little bit here, it's putting yourself first, right?
Yeah.
And clearing all this stuff out. Because, something, when I started learning about like my emotions and how to deal with them, and I realized, or I like had this picture was shown to me of, if all of us had to literally carry our emotional baggage with us, which means all the unresolved emotions, if we had to carry it, none of us would be walking around. It'd be too heavy, right? But it's clearing that out, so you can just be just this joy and love that's really there. It's all within us from when we were babies, but it's all the little traumas and the big traumas, and the disappointments and the judgments and opinions that are all so heavy, right? They're blocking the joy and the love, because that's something I've noticed and I've witnessed with clients, is when these veils of pain are dissolved, there's just the joy and the love that can just naturally flow. And so,
this kind of lightness, right?
Say that again.
It gives a kind of lightness.
Yes.
And brightness, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
Absolutely.
Radical responsibility, radical self-care. Because also when you're resourced, and you can become your own resource, right? When you're resourced, then you are a gift to others. A natural overflowing gift. And life becomes easeful and joyful. And not because you're driving it, because it's just happening.
So how do you bring that to clients, or in general to readers or watchers or listeners that have this, at least this perception of a very heavy agenda, heavy responsibilities, no time, sometimes feeling overwhelmed. And they say, "Well, how can you do this radical self-care? I have, like you have, I have parents I need to take care of, or I have children that are, that need me, or I have a very responsible job, and I cannot sit 6 hours in nature. There's no way I can do that."
Right.
How do you bring them to this state of presence where you create the openness for this?
Well, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with them.
Of course, yeah.
Right? And they, again, each person has to make their decision of what's number one importance. And yes, sometimes it looks like it's a hard, difficult decision, because we're also so trained not to put ourselves first, to put ourselves, look, I lived on the back burner for decades.
Yeah.
putting
I think that
family,
will resonate to a lot of people. Yeah.
right? Putting family and partners and stepchildren before. And
Mm.
then at a certain point, something clicked over in me, and I said, no. And it's not like I got rid of all these relationships, but I moved
Mhm.
myself forward of, what do I want to do today? What's most important to me? I put myself first. And if you do it with love and kindness and awareness and gentleness, not with a punch, not with a hard edge about it, not with yelling and demanding and all of that. When you do it with loving kindness, it is received well.
Mhm.
Yeah. I used to, in my first marriage, I would create a fight to get space because I didn't know how to say,
Mm.
I need some space. Like, it's what, 4 words? I didn't know how to say it. And so I'd
Yeah.
create a big fight. We'd go into silence. I'd get my space. And then my husband would come back to me and say, like, why did you have to do it that way? Why couldn't you just say, butt-up? I don't know.
Mm.
So, we all have our ways. And really,
Yeah.
it comes down to just personal devotion to yourself.
Mm.
Because when you're resourced, when you've spent some nice time with yourself, whatever that looks like, you are in a gentler, kinder, more easeful demeanor. And that's what everyone else around you will be receiving. Or they'll
Mm.
receive your stressed out, overwhelmed, can't think straight demeanor.
Mhm. Yeah. It seems an easy choice, right?
It gets
Yeah.
easier. I know it feels difficult and feels like awkward because it's like you're not used to being in that skin
Mm.
of putting yourself first, but there's a part of you in there that is gonna enjoy it.
Mm. Yeah. I also would like to think that making that journey, not only healing from the relationship with your mother or with another very important person that was not, you know, bringing you what you needed. It's also a very important thing to do if you are a parent yourself, because it will also impact the relationships that you have with your children and the quality of the interactions with your children. Not
Absolutely.
only in, going from the darker to the brighter side, but also as a kind of role model on how you show up and
Exactly.
how you are like the mirror for who they are and who they become.
Yeah.
Right. So that's basically, I would say, a very important reason also to talk about this radical responsibility to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because
Mm.
we're all like tuning forks to each other.
Mm.
We're all feeling and responding and reacting to each other.
Mm.
One thing I noticed the 4 years my mom and I living together, like after I would come back from the hot springs or a deep healing session, I could see and feel her keenly observing me because I was gentler, kinder, easier. I was like, you know,
Mm.
and then I noticed she would have a shift, and then I
Yeah.
would have another shift, and then she would have another shift. And I literally witnessed our nervous systems co-regulating. Not
Yeah.
a not a word was spoken about
Mhm.
whatever happened for me. Not a word. I didn't share with her my deepest healings, and I could have at towards the end, but it just wasn't the thing we talked about. But I just So I witness, there's that saying in Hawaii, Hawaiians have it and Native Americans have it, that when you do your healing, it goes back and affects 7 generations behind you and 7 generations in front of you. I literally witnessed this in our home between my mother and I.
Yeah. You're not only doing your own healing.
Yeah. So if you have
powerful.
kids, even more reason to do your work. And there's something I also want to share, something that helps bring awareness to, like, maybe some of the stories you're holding, because sometimes we're not even aware of them. I wasn't aware of some of mine. And that is to write either your mother or anybody. This applies to all relationships, but we're using the mother here because it's very poignant. But to write her a letter that no one will ever see. And it's not the writing that comes from here. It's, again, like sitting in nature, sitting in a quiet place, or first thing in the morning is a great time to do this as well. And just let it all come out. But you start with dear mom or dear mother, whatever you call her, and you just, you could start thinking about it from when you were younger, and, each like section, right? And just dear mom, and just let whatever wants to come through come through. Because what that's doing, it's taking it out of just the psyche and storyland, and you're naming it. That's powerful. And it releases then out of your system. And then you can like burn it, do whatever you want with it, but do the writing process. And also it's beneficial to do pen to paper. There's something, right, like very alchemical that happens that way. And just and don't even think about what you're writing. Just let it.
That's a kind of free fall writing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's also something very significant to do.
Yeah. Beautiful. Actually, you shared some very, important and impactful stories and wisdom from your own experience. And then, of course, all the learnings from that, and you even created, you created this one woman show. You also created programs for your own clients, for people that want to work with you and benefit from that wisdom. So what is the easiest way to get in touch with you? Is that via Facebook? Is that
the easiest way is just go to my website, and that's themothermonologues.com. And you can sign up to get informed when the show goes live. I highly recommend that, because that drops some of the things were mentioned here today, because it's just so a natural part of my story. And so there's more like drops and messages in the show. So there's that. And then there's also a way to connect with me directly if you're feeling like, oh my God, I want to know and hear more. And we have a one-on-one conversation to see if this is, working one-on-one with me is a good next step for you. Yeah.
Beautiful. All your contact information will be in the comments on the LinkedIn event and in the show notes on the YouTube page or episode for this Power Talk. So anybody that is listening or watching right now or is in the replay is very welcome to connect via everything that we will be making available in the notes. Ashleigh, one last wisdom you want to share with us? We're almost at the top of the hour. So one last thing that you feel like could be a good one for here.
Yeah. I would say acknowledge the journey that you've been on. Acknowledge the journey. because it's been impactful for you. It's unique to you. And to take a moment and say, like, ooh, yeah, this has been a ride. And I'm learning.
Mm.
And there's more to learn. And to be curious about it. And can't help but say this, and to put yourself number one.
Mm.
It helps everybody, really.
Yeah.
It does. It really does.
Mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You cannot pour from an empty vessel, they always say, and it is so
Right.
important indeed that we take care of ourselves. Absolutely. And that we support each other in taking care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. Ashley, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your wisdom, sharing your experiences, and everybody that is here. Thanks for being with us. I'm sure that you had some nudges out of this, even the reflection, the awareness, the consciousness about what is going on in our lives that we sometimes cannot put a finger on, that we are losing energy, that we feel stuck. I think that what has been brought here by Ashley could be like, the first awareness or consciousness about what it is. And we certainly brought some steps and processes like how to deal with it. And if you need support, find that support. Connect also with Ashley. She can tell you a lot more. Watch the monologues. It's so generous that you bring them, on YouTube. I really looking forward to watch them and also
Yeah.
to share them. So thank you so much for being here,
Yeah.
and
Thank
looking
you.
forward to hear more of you.
Great. Thank you
Right.
so much, dear.
Take care.
You
You're
too.
welcome.